Welcome to another edition of Nutmeg Chatter, the Claws Chatter edition. What an exciting, interesting show we have today. Today's guest has been a Wall Street lawyer, corporate counsel, CEO, investment banker, and an antique dealer. After his long career, he is currently enjoying his retirement relaxing by being an actor of both stage and screen, and also a fellow voice actor with me on Nutmeg Junction. His most recent work includes the film Chappaquiddick. Please welcome the man, the myth, the legend. Everybody, Mr. Jeff Savage. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. I wish I knew who you were talking about.
Well, you know, he didn't show up since you're here. Well, I guess I'll talk to you.
Yeah, right, exactly. You might as well.
Wait, I want to go way back to Jeff Savage's
Yeah.
early years. I mean, when you first graduated high school, did you know what you wanted to do with your life?
Well, I don't think many people do know. In fact, I remember very well, I was fortunate enough to go to a very good boarding school up in New Hampshire. And when I was graduating and had been accepted at college, my idea was, maybe I'll be pre-med, and go be a doctor. And that lasted about, after I started school, I'd say maybe 3 weeks. And I was taking biochemistry, and I had my first exam, and afterwards the professor said, "Are you sure you want to be a doctor?" And I saw what my grade was, and I said, "No, I'm not sure at all." And so I became an English major.
Well, you know what's funny? It reminds me of a George Carlin joke where he said, he goes, out there in the world, it's a matter of probability. He goes, there has to be the world's worst doctor out there. It has to be. He goes, and the scary part is somebody has an appointment with him tomorrow. Paging Dr. Savage, paging Dr. Savage.
Well, ironically, now I one of the things I do for work is I work as an actor at the Yale Medical School, portraying patients and helping to train medical students and doctors in various aspects of what they need to learn. So
it all ran full circle.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, I ended up going to law school, partly because I was an English major and I didn't like math. So I tried to figure out, well, what am I going to do where I don't have to use math a lot? And partly because I had a grandfather who was a child of Irish immigrants and quite successful and very sort of patriotic and a wonderful man. And he had emphasized to me my whole childhood, that you were fortunate to be born with advantages, and you really ought to try to give back. And one of the things he started talking about is, so one of the things you could do would be to be a lawyer and use that training to go into, like the diplomatic service or something where you have an opportunity to give back. And that was sort of in the back of my mind.
You were a corporate lawyer.
Yes, I was. Well, that's exactly. I started out practicing in New York with a big firm, and I did corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions and stuff. And I really didn't find that very fulfilling.
Sounds like fun to me.
Well, it was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't need to go into all that, but when it's very akin to investment banking, where you, as a young lawyer, corporate lawyer, or investment banker, you get the feeling that the term I used to use is cannon fodder. You represent a certain number of billable hours.
Yeah.
And so and ironically again, I ended up over a period of time getting into investment banking, which I thought I wouldn't do because I didn't like math. But I found out that two things. Number one, I wasn't quite as bad at math as I thought I was. And number two, when you get to a certain position, you can hire people who are really good at math.
I like that. That's what it's all about. And you also like the extra zeros on your paycheck. That didn't hurt.
That.
Yeah. So you made it all the way to Wall Street as well, too.
Yeah.
So you started off as a lawyer, then how'd you work your way into Wall Street?
Well, the Wall Street part is really, I practiced with what's called a Wall Street law firm. And literally our offices were on Wall Street. And when I got to the point of realizing that was not what I wanted to do for a career, I took a job as corporate counsel for an industrialist in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had gone to Virginia Law School at University of Virginia, and there were several of my law school colleagues who were practicing law in Atlanta. And my family has some southern roots, and I was very comfortable going down there. And what I did basically then was to buy and sell companies for this man who was one of the early conglomerate, founded one of the early conglomerates. And I enjoyed the negotiating part of it.
Yeah.
And what I really enjoyed was once we got down to drafting the contracts, I could send that off to another New York law firm and tell them to do the contracts. And that buying and selling companies led into getting into investment banking, although I never did that on Wall Street specifically. I focused and did it in Philadelphia and then in Connecticut, focusing on what they call middle market transactions, not the big Goldman Sachs kinds of things, but the next tier down. And it was I enjoyed that.
Now, antiques art dealer seems a little bit of a departure for you from your other jobs. How'd that come about?
Well, as I know you attended this talk that I gave at
it was called Second Act.
Yeah, called Second Act at the Palace Theater, and the emphasis on that is you're going to be a part of that next year, and
yes.
I intend to be there to hear your story. But
thank you very much. June 23rd, everybody.
I didn't
Shameless
recall
plug.
the date, but anyway, I was doing investment banking, and I was, doing well financially. But I got to the point where something in my life wasn't going right. I wasn't very happy, and I ended up having my own investment bank in Connecticut, and the bank which financed it went under, and I had guaranteed all the debt for the firm. And when the FDIC takes over a bank, they can call all loans and guarantees immediately due. You could have a 30-year loan, and it wouldn't matter. They can call it due. And they called my guarantees, and I checked the balance in my bank account, and somehow they didn't match up. And 30 days later, I ended up in the middle of divorce proceedings as well, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm not having fun. This isn't good. So I literally decided I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was living in Avon at the time, and I moved to Litchfield because I thought it was pretty, and I knew some people there, and that was really about it.
Yeah.
I just thought, I'm going to change. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to make a change in my life. This isn't fulfilling. And lo and behold, I met some people there, Peter and Jeffrey Toulouse, who are very well known in the antique and art world internationally. And I had done a lot of international work in my legal and investment banking career. They said, why don't you come work with us? And I did, and I ended up in the antique and art business.
Nice. I have so much respect for it. I'll tell you why. Because I have cerebral palsy, and I go around to different libraries and schools, and I do motivational speeches.
Yeah.
And I talk about that. I said, if you ask somebody, hey, how was your day? Well, same as yesterday. And the reason people say that is I think they're afraid to try something new. They're afraid of failure. And I always say, try something that you're uncomfortable with today. Tomorrow it'll be comfortable. Then tomorrow try something new. And then after a while, it's just going to be, common to you, and it's going to feel comfortable to you. And the more you do it, the better you get. I love the fact that you were a lawyer, CEO, counsel, and you just said, you know what? I want to try something completely different. I'm not having fun anymore. There's a lot of things going on in my life. And So I have so much respect for people that can do that, because I think a lot of people are more afraid to take that jump.
Well, thank you. That's nice. One of the things I didn't mention is that during this period of transition in my life, I also realized that one of the issues was I was drinking too much. So I decided to stop drinking, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. And I think that this attitude of sort of being resilient, let's say,
Yeah.
and open to change, comes to a great extent from two things. One, I had a father who had polio when he was 34 only, and he was a very active man, good athlete, and enjoyed all sorts of things, including dancing, going to dances with my mother, and all this stuff. And he, after he had polio, instead of just being bitter and down and angry, he was very upbeat and positive. And I'm just gonna take this. It's a bad break, but and I'm gonna do what I can. And people always admired him for it. And I think that I and my siblings sort of observed that, and subconsciously, if not consciously, and sort of adopted that sort of attitude toward life. And the other thing is that when I stopped drinking, I joined AA, and one of the things they talk a lot about there is just that. Your life gets down, and if you can keep in mind that, these sort of catchphrases, but, when one door closes, another door opens. And,
I'm a firm believer in.
which I believe in also, and things happen for a reason. And all of this was in my mind, and I thought, I'm going to take, when all this, as they say, hit the fan, I thought to myself, well, I can either be bitter and point fingers and blame my parents or something, what some people will do, or I can say, well, this is an opportunity. The world is telling me you need to make a change, and you need to examine your life and take advantage of the opportunity you have to do so. It wasn't exactly the way you'd like the opportunity to happen, but that's out of my control. So, and that's what I did, and fortunately, it worked out well.
Sometimes you need that push.
Yes.
To get you put in the right direction, because I know sometimes, like, I'm trying to think of an example. You're going through life, you're comfortable, everything's fine. You're like, you know what, you're maybe not enjoying life as much as you can or want to, but you know what, I'm getting by. But then when you get that push, you're like, you know what, I'm so glad this happened, which, like you said, maybe you don't realize it at the time, but maybe a year or two down the road, you're like, I'm so glad that happened, and
that's right.
You were able to overcome it, which, again, I have so much respect for.
Well, thank you. I mean, the reverse is true. I look at you, and you with your cerebral palsy, you wouldn't be the person you are, for better or worse.
Yeah. Some people might say worse, but
if you hadn't had that in your life, and you get to say, okay, I can deal with this. You may not realize it when you're a little guy, but over time you think, well, you know what, I can handle this.
Well, you know what, for me, I'm so happy that I was born with this, and I'll tell you why. Because if it was something like Stephen Hawking, where it happened when he was in his 20s, I would have to start all over again. With this is all I've ever known. So it's my right side is affected. It's basically my right arm and right leg. Mm-hmm. So I've always learned to do everything with my left arm. So sometimes when people will say, Rich, what happened to your arm? I said, I completely forgot about that. Like, I don't even realize what they're talking about, because so it's just, and I've actually transitioned that into doing stand-up comedy and other things, which I'll talk about in second act, June 23rd, Palace Theater, Waterbury. But yeah, so
you're also not above self-promotion.
No, not at all. I'm never above that. Anyway, we're speaking with Jeff Savage. We'll return to Nutmeg Chatter, the Claus Chatter edition, right after this. Welcome back to Nutmeg Chatter, the Claus Chatter edition. My guest today is Wall Street lawyer, CEO, antique dealer, and actor Jeff Savage. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
All right, so we talked a lot about when you first started out of college, your whole professional life, but now let's get into the fun. You retired, and now you're an actor. voice actor with Nutmeg Junction, which I love that show. And I have to tell you,
As do I.
there's two of my favorite characters of yours are Fred, Fanny and Fred.
Fanny and Fred, yeah.
But also Red. The
Oh.
character Red. My favorite line of that is every time somebody goes, "Why do they call you Red? Because of your hair?" No, because of my political affiliation.
Right.
That's a fun character.
It is. I play him as a real Southern,
Yeah.
sort of a hillbilly character, and because of my background of having lived in the South so long and having a part of my family being from the South, it wasn't hard to do.
You do it very well. Very believable. So where did your interest in acting begin? Was it as a kid?
Yes, it happened sort of by osmosis, I guess is the best way to say it. In my wacky family background, one of the people who had a lot of influence on me was one of my father's sisters, named Leslie, and she was an amazing character. I always think of her as being Auntie Mame. She in the late 30s became a showgirl, and did that for a while, and she hung out with a lot of show people, and I remember as a child meeting some of her friends, some of whom were people like Donald O'Connor and Rosalind Russell, and I didn't really appreciate who they were at the time, but and she took me to my first play, which was Damn Yankees, with Gwen Verdon and Ray Walston.
Ah, my favorite Martian.
Yes, and I remember watching that, and I was quite young.
Yeah.
No more than 10. And I remember thinking, that's really cool. All you have to do is go out on stage and sing a few songs, and everybody applauds and thinks they're wonderful. Little did I know, but and I knew that, and spending time with her, I thought in the back of my mind, gee, this would be something I'd really like to do. I never really did it for the first at least half of my life. I sang some with singing groups and things, but mostly I was too busy doing the right thing, studying and getting good grades and going to good schools and being a good boy.
That's no fun.
No, very boring. And but sometime in the last 25 years or so, I went to a college reunion, and one of my classmates and I were sitting down at dinner, and we were chatting away, and he said to me, "Hey, you know what? You can sing." And he said, "I'm doing a show, Guys and Dolls, at the Goshen Players. You ought to come out and audition for it." And I thought in the back of my mind, I'd really like to see what happens. So I did, and I got a role, and that really sort of formally got me into the idea of acting. And, gosh, that's, well, I don't know, somewhere around 80 or 90 shows later, I guess wow. I guess I got interested in it.
I think you're there. I don't think it's a phase.
I think the idea has to do. I grew up in this big Irish family, and everybody drank a lot, and when we had parties, they sang a lot. And I remember my mother had sisters who were twins, and they had a hat collection. And whenever everybody got together and they had a few drinks, they'd pull out the hats and start singing Broadway songs. And it was just sort of in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
That this is a lot of fun. And I have a cousin who's also a novelist and a lyricist. And, so it's like most Irishmen. It's there.
Oh, yeah. You're definitely making full use of it. I have to tell you a funny story because I've seen you. We'll talk about some of the movies you've been in, but there was one time I do a public access show with fellow Nutmeg Junctionaires Lana Peck and Kurt Boucher, and we were in the green room before the show started, and Lana pointed at the TV screen, "Hey, there's Jeff Savage." I said, "Where?" I see this old man with a walker, and I started laughing like, "That's Jeff? Yeah, that's Jeff Savage." So when I saw the second act of your story,
Yeah.
your girlfriend had a funny story about that. I want to hear about it.
Yes.
I think my listeners would love this story.
Oh well, it's has to do with a commercial, which I shot and which has been now running for I don't know, probably at least 3 years, for an assisted living company, which is what happens to you as you become a mature actor. But I remember showing up on where they were going to shoot it, and I said, "Oh, you mean I really have to wear that I've fallen and can't get up necklace?" They said, "Yeah," and then they said, "Oh, by the way, we want you to use this walker also." And I went, "What?" And it was about 6 inches, a good 6 inches shorter than if I had one, then I would have.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be good because it caused me to hunch over when I was using it. And my lovely lady has had several instances of people coming up to her and saying, after they've seen the commercial, "Is Jeff all right? I didn't know he had to have home aid services, and she's just started to laugh and said, "It's called acting."
See, that's funny. There was a show in the 80s called L.A. Law, and I can't remember his name, but he played Benny, and he was mentally disabled, and he said the biggest compliment he got was when people saw them, "Oh, you're normal." He goes, "I love that because that means I'm doing my job." So
Yes.
with you, doesn't matter if it's a commercial, doesn't matter if it's a movie, which we'll talk about some of the movies you've been in, but you really get into your role. You are that person. Something like the commercial, I really didn't even recognize you at first.
Yeah.
That's why I love that story. And I didn't even know the story about what your girlfriend said until when I saw your second act. But it was the same thing. It's like, wait, where's Jeff? That's him right there. I said, oh, wow.
Yeah, I think I know that if you are any good at all at acting, and I don't mean by any means to assume that I am, but by any means, but the people who I admire when I see them on screen or on stage or on TV or whatever are those people who you get beyond the stage of saying, "Oh, that's Rich Sear playing so-and-so," but you're looking and thinking that's so-and-so.
I think right now the best actor that represents that is Christian Bale.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what he plays. He could play an 80-year-old Dick Cheney. Could be an emaciated drug addict.
Yeah.
He is that person. Like I loved him in The Machinist. I loved him in the Dick Cheney movie, which they did a split screen. I couldn't tell which one was which.
No, he was amazing as Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
And I just saw him interviewed this morning on the Sunday morning CBS Sunday morning show. And here he is. He's from New Zealand or Australia or something.
I never knew until he started speaking at the Oscars.
And he's skinny.
Yeah.
And, of course, a lot younger. And that's exactly a great example of how someone can assume all of the aspects of a character, and the really accomplished actors who we all admire that's what they do. Yeah. Meryl Streep is a great example.
Yes. Have you ever worked with her?
I have not.
I know she lives in the area.
Yes, she does. She lives up in the Salisbury. I think it's Salisbury.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I wanted to mention this because we were talking about how you get into your roles. You recently were in 2 plays, The Miracle Worker, which I saw. I loved it. And then also Love Letters. And what I like about you is that whether it's the lead role or a cameo, you always give it your all. And even more importantly than that, I could always tell you're having fun. And I think that's what makes it so important. Like, that definitely translates from the stage to the audience. Mm-hmm. It's like, it doesn't matter when you were the doctor and for like a 5-minute part in The Miracle Worker, you could tell you were just you were having fun, and then Love Letters I wanted to see. I was on my way. I really did get caught in traffic, but I've heard nothing but rave reviews from most of our friends that we worked together in Nutmeg Junction. Loved it. So I'm always looking forward to seeing what you're going to do next.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that is the highest compliment when people can say to you after a show, you know, number one, you hope they enjoyed it, but even if they didn't, and I mean, you never know for sure. Most people don't come up and say, you were terrible. You know,
Yeah.
They just don't say anything, or they lie and say you were good.
Sometimes I think silence is worse, because I've done stand-up comedy, and I could tell when somebody, Rich, you were great, you were hilarious. Have a good day, Rich. Like,
yeah,
okay.
right.
So yeah, it's like, all right, well, I guess they won't be coming to the next show.
The thing that is the thing that is really satisfying to me about acting is when you assume the character of whoever you're playing, and
Yeah.
with that, the highest compliment I think I ever got was from my brother. I did a Death of a Salesman right over here at the Nancy Marine Studio Theater at the Warner Stage Company, and opening night, my brother and sister-in-law and some other people, had family members and good friends that were there, and my brother said to me after the show, he said, after 5 minutes into the show, I forgot that you were my brother.
Wow.
And that literally is the highest compliment I've ever gotten, and that's what I hope for.
Yeah.
That we can be successful in doing that, and the other thing is enjoying it, and that's another high compliment when an audience member says to you, not only did we enjoy the show, but we could tell how much you were enjoying it, and not only you, but the other actors.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I've seen you in several productions, and I actually had the honor of working with you, the 48-hour film project. I got to play the humble troubadour.
Yes, that was which you were wonderful at, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And you got to play Grandpa.
Yes, which was natural. Sadly,
I think we're being typecast. I don't know, but that was let me explain to my listeners. 48-hour film project is that you get a topic. Then you have to write what that topic is. Then you have to direct it, produce it, have the people act, then go back and edit it all within 48 hours and then release it. So we did that. It was called The Company You Keep. And it was great because the writer, producer, the man behind the curtain, Joseph Timothy Quirk of Nutmeg Junction, wrote this script. And it's a great script where he was able to incorporate all the actors. And it was sort of like we had the reality world, the reality, and then we had the fantasy world. It was more of like a gaming type of movie.
Yeah, it was not only that, but also, as I recall, they had 3 props that you were given 3 props
Yes.
that you had to use, and I think 3 lines that had to appear somewhere in the film, and nobody until Friday night at 7 o'clock or something, and the film had to be submitted by Sunday night at 7, I think. Nobody knew what they were going to get until that point. It was a real challenge, but it was fun.
It was a lot of fun, yeah. I loved it. And hopefully Tiffany Smead is the Tiffany McKay, sorry. She's Nutmeg Junction also, and she's the one that was the director, the producer of it.
Right.
She asked me to be back next year. Hopefully you get to make another appearance.
I hope so.
Yeah. But you've also done some bigger things, too. And one movie that I saw you in, I didn't even realize that was you, once again, until after I spoke with you, was the movie Chappaquiddick, about Teddy Kennedy. And tell me about your experience. First of all, how did you get that part?
I got it.
You played the lawyer.
I played, well, I was one of many lawyers in it, but I was originally, well, you asked me how I got it. I got it through a casting agency for whom I've done some work, and they got in touch with me and said there's this film coming up, and there's a role at the time, and the role I got cast for was Senator Culver from Iowa, who had been a classmate of Ted Kennedy's, a football team mate.
That wraps up another episode of Nutmeg Chatter, the Claus Chatter edition. I would like to thank my guest, Jeff Savage. Thank you very much for being on the show, Jeff. Come back anytime you want. We always have so much to talk about. But most importantly, I would like to thank you, the listener. Enjoy your day, everyone.